Welcome everybody to Walking in Two Worlds. Today's session is Crossing the Thresholds, and we're going to begin with a song by Lisa Dosher that she's going to play for us, and I'd like all of you in the text chat to begin saying hello and announcing your presence as she does that. All yours, Lisa.
All the leaves were falling, just like embers, colors red and gold, to set us on fire, bouncing just like moonbeams in our eyes. Somebody said they saw me. I was swinging the world by its head, bouncing over a white cloud, killing the blue, killing the blue. I am guilty of something I hope you never do, 'cause nothing is sudden than losing yourself in love. Somebody said they saw me. I was swinging the world by its head, bouncing over a white cloud, killing the blue. So you asked me just to leave you, set out on my own to get what I needed. You want me to find what I already had. Somebody said they saw me, swinging the world by its hair, bouncing over a white cloud, killing the blue.
Again, welcome everybody. Welcome to Walking in Two Worlds this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are around the globe and in your lives. Begin with crossing this threshold and coming in right here to this time and space. Crossing the thresholds of the technical world, crossing the thresholds from our daily external lives to this here and now place beyond the time that's happening in front of us. So let yourself close your eyes if you like, soften your gaze, rest in your chair. We begin that transition once again, as we always do, into the ground of our being. Taking a deep breath and letting go. Letting go. The first part of crossing any threshold is letting go of where you are. Letting go of where you already are, where you've been, in order to open to where you're going, where the journey will take you. Letting go of your exhalation. Letting go of your thoughts and your mind. Letting go of any worries or concerns. Letting go of any of the technology struggles you might have had coming onto the session today. Slow, deep breaths. coming into the now point, coming into a still point. Let yourself sink deeper into your chair, deeper into yourself, and now deepen your breathing. Relax your jaw and your tongue. Relax in your shoulders. Relax into your belly. Keep letting go. Just keep letting go and keep coming here. Just keep coming into the now point. That's it. Next full breath. Give yourself completely to this next inhalation. Completely in. And completely out. Keep coming right here. Right now. Nowhere else. Open your ears. Let the sounds begin to come in through the music that comes, through the music that comes inside yourself. Just let yourself go for a little ride. As Lisa sings again.
All leaves are falling, just like embers, in colors red and gold, to set us on fire.
Thank you, Lisa. Again, everybody, 3 deep breaths as we cross the threshold now, right into the depths of your chest, depths of your belly, depths of this moment, getting ready to cross the threshold. One deep breath. A little sound on the exhale if you like. It's all right, make a little sound. Second deep breath. And sound on the exhale. That's good. One more full deep breath. And I'd ask you at the end of your exhalation now to presence yourself in the chat. Those of you who are in, say that you're in, you're ready, good to go. Just announce yourselves. Everybody on the chat just typing in. So let's welcome everybody in now. That's Christy, Jen, Jenny, Chris, that's it, Will, Rebecca, Regina, Cindy, Brian, Tom, Mia, keep coming, Deirdre, Peggy, David, Jesse, Jarek, Daphne, Keep coming, everybody. Sherry, announcing yourselves in. Ava, Janelle, Jan, Uta. All right, not Undine anymore. Crossing the threshold. We begin with crossing the threshold by letting go of familiar bounds. We let go completely, and as David White says, in this high place, it's as simple as this. In this high place, it is as simple as this. You leave everything you know behind. You leave everything you know behind. That's the challenge if you're going to take a journey and if you're going to deepen more into soul presence. In the place of soul, in these high places, or these deep places, it is as simple as this. You leave everything you know behind. You step towards the cold surface, say the old prayer of rough love, and you open up both arms. Those of us who come with empty hands will stare into the lake, into the mirror of the waters, astonished, there in the cold light, reflecting pure snow, the true shape of your own face. Step towards the cold surface, say the old prayer of rough love, and open both arms. Those who come with empty hands, clear minds, will steer into the lake, astonished. There, in the cold light, reflecting pure snow, the true shape of your own face. The true shape of your own face. This is what we've got to do if we're going to be journeying here in our lives in these days ahead. Today our session represents our willingness to cross a threshold. We've been listening and we've been called and hearing a certain call to adventure and being pulled into a certain way, a certain path, pulled deeper inside to pay attention and to listen to the sounds and the subtle feel of the soul calling. And as we do that, we come to the threshold point where we've got to cross over into the journey, where we have to step fully onto the path of adventure and into the unknown. And we have to align ourselves in a way that's going to move past all these opposing internal forces that create the stalemates and blocks and hesitations in our lives, so that we can give more and more attention to the one heart's desire that burns within us. And so if you can relate to any of this as we're going along, feel free to keep writing into the chat. So we leave what we know behind. Leaving what we know behind. What does that touch in you? Having to leave what you know behind. Things you've already done. Not living according to that been there, done that philosophy. Being able to be in good relationship to what you don't yet know. To places you haven't yet been in the world and inside yourself. To new efforts, new behaviors, new people. New ways of living that may feel uncomfortable or uncomfortable in a way that's enlivening and not just anxiety producing, though we often have to bear anxiety in order to take that way. So here what we have to do is confront half-heartedness inside ourselves. Any place inside ourselves that tends to go halfway, only a portion of the way. And when we start to feel the tensions, pressures, the inner resistances that we all feel right at a certain threshold when we're about to give ourselves fully into a spirit of adventure. Where is that for you in your life? What are you living into right now in your life that you feel like you're on the edge of, you're approaching the edge of? Some way, some place, or some activity, event, or maybe just a commitment to really deepen and grow in some way. And you're standing or approaching this edge where you can feel the tension of what you're about to move into, as well as that reluctance. And here is where we'll draw a little bit from Rumi, a little more soul medicine for Rumi, who says, you'll have to gamble everything for love if you're a true human being. You'll have to gamble everything for this kind of love if you're a true human being. The love of the path of adventure, the mythic path, the path of the mystery. You'll have to take risks, is what he's telling us. We will have to take risks. We'll have to gamble everything for this kind of love. If we're true, if we're authentic in our humanity. He says, if you're not willing to take these kinds of risks, it's best that you leave this gathering. If you're unwilling to take risks, it's best that you leave this gathering, because half-heartedness does not reach into majesty. Half-heartedness just won't get you there. He says, we set out to look for God, to seek the soul's purpose, but then we keep stopping for long periods of time at mean-spirited roadhouses. We get caught up in our self-concerns, our distractions, our worries. We get pulled down, we get confused, we start to doubt. We start listening to what others have to tell us to do. And even if they have good points, we don't listen to ourselves, which is why we were practicing in the last session, listening, practicing the call. And here's what's going to happen at the threshold point for all of us. Here's what's coming. Once we let go of what's familiar, and once we decide to commit further and start to cross some threshold, and we start to feel into these unknown places or new places, or simply going where we haven't gone before, once we start going there, we've got to face the shadow inside ourselves. All the unconscious or semi-conscious material feelings in the psyche that holds us back, our inner wildness or wilderness. In these unknown places, in these open fields, it's ripe for all the projections of our unfinished business. And the heroic effort and the hero of today has to face their own projections. All of the disowned aspects of the self and all of the primary fears, or the main belief or image that stops you from going beyond familiar boundaries. So we have to know ourselves well enough to know what that is, what that primary fear is, or feeling is, or belief is that would stop us. So the threshold guardian stands just like the gargoyles above the entrance to the medieval cathedrals. All those half-human, half-beast that you see, that aren't just there to frighten us away. They're the ones saying the same thing that Rumi says. Don't come in here. Don't head for the soul's journey. Don't take the heroic journey. Don't dare search for the shrines or the treasures of the boons with a half-hearted gesture. It just won't get you there. And confront whatever that fear is, or that belief is, or that one thing inside yourself, that primary thing that guards the threshold to entering into the mystery, the love of the adventure, the beauty of the journey. And see, what is that mean-spirited roadhouse inside of yourself that's just ready to muddy up the works. So that's going to be your work in this primary, in this particular stage of the journey, is looking at what your threshold guardian actually is. Who's not there, by the way, to judge you. And this is really important to distinguish, that this is not a self-judgment. is not you judging yourself. The threshold guardian is there to make sure you have a wholehearted gesture when you go past the point of no return. So what is it for you? If you can name that, we're going to continue here. Really, if you can name that, I'd like you to type into the text or get ready to come onto the live video and name what you know to be true about your own threshold guardian. And by doing that, you do that on behalf of everybody else who's either on the live broadcast today or on the who'll be watching the recorded broadcast at some other point after this time. So let's hear from some of you who are willing to list and name what your threshold guardian is. You know, I wrote about this in the essay for Crossing the Threshold that you'll have available to you if you haven't seen it yet. And one of the things that I recognized for my own threshold was this feeling of discouragement or despair that would come up, and feeling whatever it is that I was doing or whatever I would put this whole effort in for, it would not amount to anything. And that would be what the feeling of defeat would be for me, the feeling like, wow, it's just not going to happen. There's no point in this. But rather that being the end point, I've come to recognize that is the fear. And that's the belief that always shows up just before the threshold turns and the paradigm shift occurs, and a whole new wave of energy or inspiration or possibility opens after I go through that, not by avoiding that. So that's the challenge here, is being able to name it and to know it and to be able to speak about it as well, whether you journal or talk with others about it. Some of you are doing that in a text chat right now. I'd like to see if we can have you type in the text response in the box underneath where it says questions, and type in your words that you hear your threshold guardian say to you that keeps you from going. Like David, who's put his up. You will fail. Don't open any further. Don't open yourself up for this. You know, those negative beliefs that feel sure. And you notice how when we tend to think these things, we really believe them as if they're true, as if they're facts, and not necessarily rooted in feelings. And anyone that'd be willing to come on and talk about this, I'd like to bring you up and just have you name your threshold guardian, or how you wrestle with your threshold guardian. Here Tom has his as well. Let's see, we got it here. Yeah. You will lose everything you accomplished and gathered, and this for the unknown. Yeah, exactly, right? It's true. We will lose everything. We'll lose everything that we're certain of. That's one of the entry fees to this. And you don't know what you get because there's no guarantees on an adventure. And we learn over and over again that we let go of everything, right? We've got to let go. We've got to let go if we're going to be able to bring something new back in. We can't take something new in while we're holding on to it. We lose everything. We loosen everything. We get less attached to our accomplishments in order to move towards new accomplishments. Thanks for that, Thomas. Janelle, you're being foolish. You're imagining things. It has nothing to do with real life. I love this one. See if you all relate to this one. You know, you're being foolish. Well, on the hero path, you had better be a fool if you're going to come this way. You've got to be foolish. You have to have the spirit of the fool, because the rational mind does not take well to adventure. and interprets everything negatively. And the fool actually, in the archetypal realm, is the one thing that can free up the king, frees the king of his misery. The fool, the one who doesn't take it all too seriously, who doesn't get over attached to ego concerns. That's called fool. And you got to be willing to feel foolish and risk being foolish to enter the adventure. So I appreciate that, Chanel. Any more reflections or anyone that's willing to come on and speak? We'll take that now, and then we'll be moving on to the next phase. Brian has one. If I open my heart, I will be hurt. But opening my heart also allows for the possibility of total fulfillment, which is scary. Oh, yeah. Right. Wholeheartedness is absolutely the entrance for you to cross any threshold. If I open my heart, I will be hurt. And we often confuse hurt with injury, that would be injured or permanently damaged, rather than feeling a hurt as a way of awakening or feeling a pain as a way of moving through something, like when we work out physically, or we over-identify with the hurt, and again we take it too personally, which is often the thing that stops us from crossing the thresholds that we have to cross on the hero's journey. Thank you for that one, Brian. Eva, I only know how to dive in. It's the cold sweat of my decision afterwards which haunts me. That's well said. Yeah, so we cross the threshold, right? Some of us, we gear up, we give our whole heart to it, we leap over, and once we're in, then the fear comes when we've committed ourselves to action or to a course that we can't really alter or control, is maybe another way to say that. The cold sweat of my decision, my decisiveness. And for Beva and the others here on the journey, taking this journey together, I hope we can all feel that capacity for decisiveness as if every decision is final. You know, when we're traveling the hero's journey, we all remember we are not going down a straight line. That's not what's happening. We're not going from A to B. But once we dive in, we're going to go a certain portion of the path and then hit another wall and have to turn again, make another decision, change our course again, depending on the terrain and the weather, the circumstance and the people. Again and again, making a decision, moving on, living according to it. So one thing we can say for sure that we know, and we know this from all the people, and I know a few of these people personally myself, but the researchers who work with the dying, research scientists and the hospice care people, the professionals and the personal people who work with the dying, at the end of life, the primary regret is not what somebody has done, is not so much about decisions that they made in courses of action that they've taken up, but their primary regret is what they didn't do, what they refused to decide about, or choosing not to choose. It's what we don't do. It's thresholds that go uncrossed that we tend to regret the most. So thank you for that reflection, baby. And Martina says, yeah, I am scared of losing my loved ones by making a decision. And that's a very real human fear, right? That if I cross a certain path or go a certain way, who's going to go with me? What if people don't go with me? And that's a legitimate fear. I remember Sam Keen, the author of Fire in the Belly, who said you have two important questions to ask in life. Where am I going? And who's going with me? Where am I going? And who's going with me? And he says it's really important not to get those questions reversed and to have them in the right order. And to know where you're going, to be the loved one for yourself, means that you'll go and you'll have yourself where you go. And often the people that love you adapt and go with you if they have that ability and that desire and willingness. They often do. And those that don't. But if you don't go because of your loved ones, and you don't have yourself, and then you lose your loved ones, then you don't have anything. Then you don't have anything. Thanks, Martina. We have one more, then we're going to go to a video question with Deirdre. How can I balance this need for significance with the letting go of my fear that holds me together? This need for significance and this fear of letting go that holds me together. Great question, Jim. And on the Hero's Journey Wilderness Adventures we talk about this letting go and the fear that we all have of falling apart, because the ego is we're concerned that if we let go, we're going to disappear, become nothing, we lose something. And we need to have the feeling by practicing this, which we're going to be doing more consciously over the next 2 weeks, of falling together in a new way. Rather than falling apart, how we would fall together in some new fundamental way that we can't do when we're holding tight. That we can let go and feel like we're more than we were before, because there's more space, there's more substance, and we're not holding against ourselves, holding life back. Deirdre's talking about the courage to express herself and to make room for herself, being the champion of herself. And now she's going to have a chance to have the courage to express now.
Hi, can you hear me?
A little louder, Deirdre.
Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. I would say over the last several years I've been on a journey, but it feels like it's accelerating in the context of this course helping me. But I realized that I was in a relationship where
That's right. Because we have a little echo, Deirdre, I'll see if you want to add anything else, then I'm going to respond to what you said. Thanks for coming on. Courage. Deirdre, it's 38 degrees down there in Dallas, isn't it? I know that's where my daughter is today. You know, what Deirdre's saying about this idea of expressing herself and having the courage to express herself and the willingness to do that, knowing that not everybody's going to understand. Some people are going to react negatively to it. And you can feel as she's speaking her desire to be authentic and to want more and more of her life to come forward, her artistic expressions, and not just pouring herself into her work, and her desire to find people who resonate more with these more fluid natures, with these more expressive natures. This is the heart of the conflict for the journey. I think Deirdre was talking about. The idea that we would have to be true to this inner movement, which is why we need the wholeheartedness, that's going to come up against the cultural expectations and demands, sometimes from our families, sometimes from our friends in the culture, sometimes, and for many of us, especially in our work worlds, where the goal is the economic sustenance of the company, and not necessarily the soul of the individual. And it's our responsibility to follow this and to move with this in some way, and to have the willingness to face the internal threshold guardians mostly, though. What we've got to be able to see is many of the things that we fear coming at us from the people around us or the things around us are really an expression of our own shadow fears or judgments that we hold against ourselves, that we've got to let move. Anybody else that wants to come on and have the risk of expressing themselves live on the video feed, please go in and click on the live video section, or to type your text responses into what's being said that will feed more into the discussion. So I'll be waiting for some of you to come on while we move forward a little bit here. So how are we all doing? You can just keep speaking to that in the chat. How is it going? So crossing the threshold. One of the things that's going to happen for us as we cross this threshold and we start bearing the pressure of going beyond these opposing forces inside ourselves is we're going to feel this commitment level where we have to say yes. Again, saying yes to it all. And there's going to be a point of no return. A feeling that if I go any further, I know I won't be coming back, or I can't come back the same. It's going to change everything in some fundamental way. And what happens for us sometimes on these hero journeys, soul journeys, is that we love the idea, and we know we're tired of the way it is, and we want to move away from what is. But as we start moving towards what is not yet, we get closer to that certain threshold point. That's when we feel the tension of commitment, where we've got to surrender. I think this is what Jim was also talking about. You know, I want more significance. I want more meaning. I want more vitality. But, you know, I have a lot of good things already. I can appreciate some of these things I want to let go of. You know, some of the things I want to let go of are not bad. But I know that there's more for me. And I can't know in advance what I'm going to get. That's the thing about adventure. We'll talk about this more in the adventures and ordeals segment. You don't get to know in advance what the outcome is. If you have a sense of how it's going to turn out, it's not an adventure. So come what may is the mantra of the hero. Let what wants to come, come. So, you know, we let go, and now we're going to let come. And something is going to change. Something is going to be different, and it will not be within our control. So how are we all doing? So far, so good. We have about 20 more minutes left. So we're going to look for some of you to come on and respond and share some of the things that you're speaking in the chats. A lot of activity, which is great in our chats. And right now we have, just so that you all know this, I think we have about 95 enrolled in the course, and I'm not sure how many of that is on the session right now. So we're having a lot of activity, and we're going to encourage you all to keep connecting with one another. So let's talk about this crossing the threshold a little further from the standpoint of bridging the worlds between the pairs of opposites. Bridging the worlds between the pairs of opposites. when we feel ourselves willing and able to move beyond something that's been a long-held boundary, a long-time limitation, or a barrier, or as we'd call it, a stuck point, and we begin to feel ourselves actually crossing over now, acknowledging and respecting and even using some of the fears, of the gargoyles as we cross the threshold and say, okay, let's let this adventure begin. We can sometimes have a profound sense of opening to the unknown and coming into good relationship to the unknown and an appreciation for mystery while walking in an ordinary world. And it's an unforgettable moment and feeling. And we feel taken where we never thought we would go, and it's always a surprise. Rilke, the beautiful German poet who inspires a lot of the mythic adventure work that we have here, his poem says, as once the winged energy of delight carried you over many chasms early on. As once the winged energy of delight carried you over many chasms early in your life. The playful spirit of the child he's talking about here. As it once was like that, we had the winged energy of delight as children. Now, beyond the life you live right now, build the great arch of unimagined bridges. Build something great that spans in a previously unimagined way across your future. You use the same spirit of the child, of child's play, to create something meaningful and wondrous in the adult life that we live. He says, wonders happen if we can succeed in passing through the harshest of dangers. Wonders would happen if we could just succeed in passing through what we perceive to be the harshest of dangers. And it's our perception of danger is the primary thing that stops us. Not that it's actually dangerous, because it's going to involve risk. We've already spoken about that today. There's no way to do this journey without risk. But the greatest risk for many of us in the end will be our clinging to security. Costs us so much. So wonders happen if we can succeed in passing through the harshest of our perceived dangers. But it's only in a bright and purely granted adventure that we can realize the wonder of the journey. We can't realize the wonder or the boon without the bright and purely granted adventure that we step into. To work with the mystery of things when we build the bridge beyond words. It's not too hard for those of us who are heroic. To work with the mystery of things when we build the bridge beyond words is not too hard for us. And even though the journey grows more intricate and more subtle, and just being carried along is not going to be enough for us anymore. And the time here as we cross the threshold is to take a practiced power, and to stretch ourselves out and to take the risk, and to be a bridge until they span the space inside us between the opposing forces. Taking the practice of our powers to be centered, to be still, to be courageous, to go into the unknown, and to stretch and to reach out and extend ourselves is the place, Rilke says, inside human beings where God lives and even God learns. So, this is the crossing the threshold for many of us, is to say, I know black, I know white. I know the pairs of opposites. I know good, I know bad. I know right, I know wrong. But I'm going to bridge beyond that now. I'm going somewhere that I haven't gone before. And I'm going into the unknown space, the undefined spaces between them, and to become a bridge. And inside that space is where the divine lives, where the journey really gets interesting, where the sorrows and joys of life come alive and become more and more real to us. Here comes some more text questions now. Or text responses. Sherry, yes, the miraculous creation of letting go in the unknown and still fear numbs me into forgetfulness. Yeah? Isn't that the way, Sherry? We go back and forth between that. The same old fear. Here we go. Same old fear. That's the threshold guardian. If you can remember, Sherry, that fear that tends to numb you, that's your threshold guardian right before the miraculous creations that come out of letting go. Vim, hey Vim. As I come close to that barrier, I feel an ocean of sadness and despair I normally avoid feeling. Yes, absolutely. That's the entry fee. That's it. Yeah, that's what I was speaking about as well. That for many of us, that trough, that descent down, is not evidence of failure or a measure of our inadequacy. It's the pathway through. The pathway through into the next opening, if we can only know that, and if we can work with others and to be supported by others when we pass that threshold. Thanks for that observation. Suzanne, doesn't this journey actually change our DNA? Another good question. You know, it seems to be in neuroscience today, the popular and revolutionary adventure seems to be neuroplasticity. And isn't it amazing that we're alive at this time with such profound technological advance and ways to broadcast this, even like this lecture, to everybody across the globe, that we have access to all of this information from science now that says we can actually change the brain's neural net. By practicing new behaviors, we will change our brain pattern. You can grow your learning capacity, and you can change throughout the span of a lifetime, and it's not limited or stopped by age, even if it may be more restricted, that we can actually do that. So I wonder, Suzanne, if we can change everything else in the brain's wiring, why we wouldn't be able to have that change in the DNA take place? That's a good question. Tom, who is going on the journey? Yeah, who is that one? We'll be talking about this, Tom, again in a future session about the idea when you fall into a deep silence, we go back before the renewal of adventure. We renew ourselves because we go back into that space before all time even began, that we go back before the beginning of the universe. And the ground of being that's outside of time is about all of that, about how we go back over and over again to renew ourselves and to reinvent ourselves if we can drop into that space before our next action. The fears of being annihilated. I think the ego always fears annihilation, is always concerned about that, and worried that it will be replaced, fired, destroyed. And that's the testing ground, I think, Brian. Does that actually happen? Will we actually be annihilated or taken out? Or is it just that the ego would have to change its relationship to something larger and more vast than itself that remains unknown to the ego? I think the most humbling thing, and you can see if this is true for you, I think the most humbling thing for those of us who consider ourselves advanced in any way, particularly if we've been doing this path of personal awareness for a long time, is coming to the recognition and the conclusion that there's so much beyond ourselves that we just don't know, and that the ego can't possibly know, and that the unconscious or the psyche or the soul is actually running the show. It's scary to let go of the dreams and risk that they might not come true if I truly let go. Well, Chris, I don't know if this is what you're referring to, but I think many of us cling to our dreams, and some people call us dreamers. And sometimes some of us can be in danger of just dreaming, because if you're dreaming, and you're only dreaming, you don't have to take the journey. And one of the dangers of dreaming, being a dreamer, is that the dream becomes more appealing than the reality. So if I dream that I'm going to be rich and famous and live in a big mansion and whatever the dream fantasy would be, I'm afraid to take steps to realize it may not look just like I dream about. But if we're doing the hero's adventure and we're doing this in ordinary life, then we find that the actual thing we do, even though it's not grand, it's also not grandiose. And the simple things or the ordinary things lived fully are better and feel more nourishing and more fulfilling than some grand dream. But we need the dream to create the possibility, the creation of possibility for us to take the adventure. Glad you brought that up, Chris. And we'll take one here from Jenny before we start finishing up on the text questions. Am I willing to let my heart be broken open by the immensening of the suffering I feel? That's a good question, huh, Jenny? Another good question. Would I be willing to be broken open by the immensity of the suffering I feel? Isn't that something we all know? Isn't that something we all know? Suffering. And many of us have a hard time with this. What is the point of suffering? Why so much suffering? Why do I have to suffer? Why is there suffering on this planet? And I think the best response that I have found to that and have heard from that was that the purpose of suffering, if it serves any purpose at all, is that it's to bring forth compassion. Genuine and authentic human suffering evokes compassion in other people. And their compassion happens to us. And our suffering happens to them. Or, many of you will know this, right, in the opposite dynamic, where the authentic suffering of another human being evokes an authentic compassion in us, and we respond naturally. Campbell talked about this, that the heroic, the superhuman effort that comes sometimes out of human beings is evoked by tremendous suffering that we see. And then ultimately, the genuine hero response today is then growing that same capacity to have compassion for our own suffering, whatever that we suffer with. And when we don't have compassion for our own suffering, then we create unnecessary suffering. I was appreciating Lisa's song at the beginning of the session today, because it was about killing the blues. Who doesn't know the blues? And we're in the autumn season here. I think for most of us on this call, we're in the autumn season. Some of you are in springtime who are on the southern hemisphere. But collectively, the darkness is coming now. Everything's falling off the trees here in my yard. Excuse me. And literally watching the trees, leaves come down, the wind blowing through them. The night's coming, cold is coming, and it represents that aspect of ourselves, that genuine darkness that comes, and to be reverent towards it, and to have compassion, and to be able to go into the dark and into the unknown is a requirement of the hero. So, just a few comments into the chat. How are we doing? How is it going? What's striking you? You can type that in. Last thing I want to talk about here before we finish up today. The spirit of play. We've got to have the spirit of play. That when we when we have the courage to become a bridge and to be open-minded, open-bodied, suspend our judgments, stop identifying with the pairs of opposites, going into the unknown regions beyond all that, letting something new come forward, committing ourselves to that path. Committing ourselves to that path engages the spirit of play. And the final quote that I want to read from Goethe today, the botanist and scientist, and another incredible human being ahead of his time. This is a quote many of you will recognize. It has to do with a commitment to this wholehearted path, crossing a threshold and saying, we're going to let this journey begin. Until one is committed, there's hesitancy, chance to draw back, half-heartedness, and always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. Campbell spoke about this. You take one step towards the gods first, so that they can take 10 steps towards you. Again, concerning all acts of initiative, creation, the journey way, there's one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves with us too. All sorts of things occur to help one out that would never otherwise have occurred. Goethe wrote about this, 200 years ago. The whole stream of events issues forth from this decision. Everything starts streaming as a result of this decision, Beva. We're talking about the cold sweat that comes. If we can only recognize that we move providence when we give ourselves wholeheartedly and we're willing to suffer for something worthwhile. A whole stream of events issues from our commitment to act, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance which no woman or man could have dreamed would have come his or her way. This is what he's talking about crossing a threshold. When we step over, we go into the unknown, we're going to have fear, doubts, and insecurities because we're going to be entering the forest, which is what we talk about next time. But Goethe says and ends with this, whatever you can do, whatever you dream about doing, begin it. Get started. Boldness has genius, power, magic, and I would say mystery in it. Whatever you can do, dream you can do, the time is to begin it. The time today is we're all consciously willing to cross the threshold, and now the journey is going to take us. Now the journey takes us. And if you're ready for that, what I want you to do now is simply to quiet yourself one more time. Quiet yourselves. Drop into your body. Take some deep breaths. And feel that place that's ready to step over. And what you would step over to is just a wholeheartedness. The wholeheartedness of letting the soul's journey, the soul inside of you, take you further now. It's the beginning of that now. Letting that happen and letting that come. Quieting yourselves, getting ready. deep breath. 12 minutes here. And close your eyes. We're going to let the commitment to cross the threshold that you will say yes to in your own way when you're ready to let the journey here. We're all going to go together now. All 95 of us are going to be moving in this week deeper into feeling this journey start to take us over and start to move us. And we'll be writing about that on the Facebook pages or emails. So just let yourself go now. Listen to the music. And when you're ready to say yes, you can type that in. I'm crossing over. Let the journey take me in your own ways. You can type it into the text chat. And if you're not ready, wait till that moment comes.
Now you ask me just to leave here, go out on my own, find what I'm needing. You want me to find what I already have. Somebody said they saw me. I was swinging the world by its tail, bouncing over a white cloud, killing the blue, killing the blue. I am guilty of something. I hope you never do. Nothing is sadder than losing yourself in life. Somebody said they saw me. I was swinging the world by its tail, bouncing over.
Thank you so much, Lisa. So as we finish the session today on that beautiful note, there are 2 questions to be asking yourself. Where am I going? And who's going with me? Well, if you're crossing the threshold and you're saying yes right now to let this adventure take you, your soul's going with you. Providence will begin moving this. And your job is to watch that taking place in the days ahead, perhaps when you least expect it. Crossing the threshold, your soul is going with you. You're going with you. And who else is going with you is we are. All of us here on the journey, each in our own way. We're all going, and we're all being moved, and we're all moving forward now together. And there are ways you can do that. You know, we have all these threshold crossings happening on the live video. We have a beautiful video created by John Atwood that will be posted today on interviews from people from the hero's journey on what they're crossing the threshold speaks to them. I encourage all of you to go to the Facebook page, Walking in Two Worlds, and we're going to title this now, the Crossing the Threshold Points, and to speak what's happening for you. And you're going to have invitations to share literal things happening in your life where you're experiencing the threshold crossing happening. Now the journey is going to take us. And now it's going to take us into the forests of adventure, the realms of adventure. We're not in charge. We're being taken for the ride. We're being pulled.